Hello and welcome to another episode of Art of Impact.
On this episode, I had the chance to speak to Preethi Kasireddy, who's a self-taught coder, tech entrepreneur, and former investment banker. Preethi initially majored in industrial and systems engineering at USC in Los Angeles. During our talk, Preethi mentioned how the ambition she saw in fields such as, investment banking pivoted her toward a career in the industry. And after working at Goldman Sachs and later Andersen Horowitz, which is a venture capital firm, her interest in entrepreneurship, specifically in the tech and blockchain industries, gave her incentive to teach herself how to code and eventually go on to found a blockchain-inspired tech company named True Story, which we do discuss in our chat. Preethi now mainly focuses on teaching others and is very active on her blog as well, which I've linked in the description if you guys wanted to check it out. And that being said, I had a great time speaking to Preethi, and I hope everyone listening to this enjoys the conversation and takes something from our chat.
Hey, I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. So I guess one of my first questions that I wanted to ask you is I know that you studied engineering in your undergrad, and I'm sort of wondering as to why you chose to study that particularly. Did you have certain affinity towards engineering coming out of high school, or was it just something you were interested in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I, like most high schoolers, didn't really know what I want to become when I grow up, quote unquote. And so I actually went to college undecided. I chose undecided major, and then I decided I was just going to take a bunch of classes and figure out which ones really which ones I gravitated towards, which ones I enjoyed, and which ones I think I could pursue a career out of. And so the first whole semester, I just took a bunch of classes. And a few things I knew in high school was that I'm really, really good at math. I'm really good at physics. But from a personal standpoint, I really enjoyed like understanding people and psychology. So I was kind of looking between like psychology or psych or sociology, and then on the other hand, like majoring in something like physics or math or engineering. Took a bunch of classes and ended up realizing that if I'm going to pay for college, I might as well get something that has like that'll be worthwhile once I graduate. And I felt like an engineering degree, it's a concrete, objective degree that you can kind of say, yeah, I have an engineering degree and I worked really hard for it. So in the end, I ended up taking engineering, and I decided I would like minor in some of the other things that I was more interested in on the side.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool opinion, and I feel like, do you feel like a lot of other of your classmates, for example, sort of had that vision going into university, or were they more set on like a specific branch of engineering? Because engineering is obviously a very broad field.
Yeah, I think there were a few people in the undecided major. Honestly, there were not a lot. It was probably 40 of us that were undecided engineering. So a lot of people actually came in and just chose their major, which I found interesting because it's like, how do they know that that's what they want to do? I don't know. I think it just maybe they just read the description. They're like, this sounds cool, and decided to do it.
Yeah. I feel like these descriptions sometimes can be misleading
Yeah.
for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
so another thing I wanted to ask you was, I know that like during and after your sort of undergrad experience, you sort of went into investment banking and worked a few internships there before starting full time. So I know at U of T, especially at our commerce school in Rotman, there's a huge like sort of gravitation towards investment banking in the commerce section of studies. But I'm wondering how that translates into engineering and how you got exposed to that area of the field.
Yeah. Like I don't think I probably was the only engineer who became an investment banker. It's not normal. It's not something that anyone encourages. Um, And like I was one of those people that ever since freshman year I started to like go to every career fair because I just wanted to figure out like what was out there for me after I graduated. And I had internships every year, and I was just like doing trying out a bunch of things because I didn't really know what I truly wanted to do afterwards. And then junior year, through one of the career events, I met a friend who had finished his internship at a bank, and he's like, you should totally come to our career event, it's gonna be awesome. And he was honestly just trying to recruit people to come because he was incentivized to bring people, and the more people he brought, the more valued club member he was. So he brought a bunch of people, and I was one of them, and I had no idea. Like when he said banking, I had no idea what it was. Like I literally didn't know what a financial statement was. I don't know what a cash flow statement. I don't know anything about finance. Like I didn't even know how money works, right? Like, and so I showed up, and I think what I really liked about that event was like all these people were super hustler mindset. Like I could tell they were like super competitive. They really wanted to go and like hustle for this investment banking job that was like so prestigious. And that was completely different from the more laissez-faire, like, you know, I'm cool, like I'll have a job no matter what type of attitude that engineers tend to have. Because engineers, like, like it's really hard not to have a job if you have an engineering degree. Like you'll end up with a job, you'll be fine. So the engineering kids didn't really go to career fairs, they didn't do any of all that. They kind of just waited until May came around, and then like they had a bunch of offers because everyone wants to hire engineering majors. Whereas like the business students, like it was super cutthroat competitive. And there was something about that energy that I really liked. And I was like, God, these guys are actually like, they're out there like trying to like hustle and get their jobs. And so I kind of got into the crowd that way and ended up minoring in business. And then I serendipitously met someone from Goldman who really liked me. He liked my hustle. And then through like 10 interviews, after like 10 coffee meetings with different people at Goldman, I finally got an interview there and then got the offer.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. And this mindset, like you're right. Like even like you'll see it like in all like commerce programs or that path towards investment banking. But I'm wondering, like looking back right now and reflecting, do you think that mindset everyone should have it at some point in their career, or is it not that important, like looking back and reflecting?
What kind of mindset?
Like the sort of like a very competitive, like do or die sort of mindset when it comes to what you want out of your career.
I would say absolutely it's important if you are early in your career, because like I would say the time and investment that you put into your career in your early 20s, or 18 to 25, means a lot more than if you do the same amount of work between like the ages of 30 to 40. This is just my opinion, because at that age, if you build relationships that early, then you're kind of set for the next 2 or 3 decades, right? Like me, like I kind of have relationships all across the board now. I know people at Goldman, I know people at Andreessen Horowitz, I know people in crypto, and like I don't really have to hustle to get those now because I have those relationships, and that time that I put in early in my career compounds over time.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like if you don't do that and you're kind of just like, oh, figure it out later, and sure, before you know it, you're like, like 26, and then you have no idea like what you're doing with life. And a lot of people end up there, and then they end up figuring it out. It's not like they don't, but if your goal is to be like successful and have a good career, then yeah, you do need to work hard in those early days. Don't be like a lazy college kid and then be lost trying to like figure out what you want to do when you're like 28 or something. But I see that happen a lot, like where people like, instead of using those 4 years to just like build relationships and figure out what they want to do, they kind of just fuck around, I guess. And it's not to say that like you shouldn't have fun in college, because a big part of going to college is a social experience. Like, I hands down will say, yeah, you should be partying, you should be having fun, because like you don't get that time again. But you also aren't spending $200,000 to not know what you want to do after all of it, if you're going to go to college. Like, if you're going to put that much time and money into it, why don't you spend that time to go build a network, right? Just like, you go to business school to build a network, and in college you should be hustling to go build a network, and doing internships and blah, 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 blah. Because again, like, all that time and energy that you put into your career early on compounds. And when you're that young, you have way more energy than you will any time in your life. You have drive, you have motivation. Like, you can sleep for 4 hours a day and still be fine. Like, I slept for 4 hours for 10 years. Like, I can't do that anymore. I would go, I would just collapse. But like, I was able to do that for 10 years. So like, yeah, like, work hard when you're young and then reap the benefits when you're older.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And like the counter, sort of why I asked you that is because the counter to what you're saying is like the general consensus that college you should like really have fun during that time. You're still like very young. Everything like will sort of pan out in the later years. But then again, like if it is your goal to have a successful or like prosperous career, then it's worthwhile to build those relationships early on because you can and you have the opportunity to do so. You don't have any like responsibilities or anything.
Yeah, and like it's not even about getting straight A's in college. That's not even what I mean. It's more about like using your professors, using your college mates, etc., to build a network, to go and hang out with the smartest people. And so that, like, because like opportunity comes from, you have to surround yourself with the right people, because opportunities exist there. They don't exist anywhere else. So if you surround yourself with smart people, and you put yourself in situations where you can be surrounded by those people, then opportunities will naturally come out of that. Whereas if you're just kind of like partying all day, but then like you kind of just hang out with your buddies, and you're not really putting yourself in a situation where those opportunities can exist. And so one thing that I think I did differently was I had friends, I partied, like, don't get me wrong, I partied my ass off, but like, I also like, I kind of would go above and beyond what my friends did, and I would hang out with people that they weren't hanging out with. Like, I would hang out with people who were 3, 4, 5 years older than me. I'd have coffee meetings all the time with people in these different companies, mostly because I just wanted to figure out like what they do day to day. I was like, what the hell? Like, okay, so like I was like, okay, I want to have a coffee meeting with people at Deloitte, because when you're in college, Deloitte sounds cool. So then like I had coffee meetings with people there, and then I had coffee meetings with people at various investment banks, and then I had coffee meetings with people at engineering companies. And just by having all these coffee meetings, I just kind of understood like what they do day to day, and I was able to rule out a bunch of stuff that I just didn't want to do. I was like, this is not what I want to be doing day to day, even like a year from now, let alone like 5 years from now. So it kind of gave me a head start in figuring out like what I want to do and who I want to be with.
Yeah, and like speaking to a lot of people along those lines sort of like opens your mind to a lot of different careers and just like perspectives, I can imagine.
Yeah, because like I think what I've noticed is, if you're okay, one way to go about your career is to be an entrepreneur, right? In that case, like, you don't really need to think about which company you're going to work for, which job you're going to have. You're not a salaried employee. But if you're not going to go be an entrepreneur, then which 95% of people are not, and then you need to figure out like what job you want. And I think most people end up just doing a job that is available to them, or they're slightly qualified for, but is not really one that they actually thought about and they want genuinely. And it's because they don't spend the time to do the research. They don't spend the time to like figure out like what are all the available options, and what do I think I will enjoy, what do I think I will be good at, and where can I see myself succeeding. Like, what are my skills that will allow me to succeed in this particular career. And so like so many people, like even I have family members who, who had great times in college, but then they're, 24 and they're like, oh, should I get an MBA now? Because I still don't know what I want to do with my life. And it's like, okay, you go get your MBA and then by that time you're like 27 and you're still kind of haven't had like any idea what you want to do. And like, that's not to say that because like I will contradict myself here because like,
Feel free.
it's not like it's not like you're picking your career for the rest of your life either. But like, if you just continue to like have no clue what you want to do and you're unhappy, then I think that it's not really leading to anywhere. Whereas like if you start somewhere and you're like, okay, I did this, I really pursued it hard, and then I'm switching careers, like I think that's fine. But like if you're completely lost, without an idea of what you want to do, then like you're just wasting time.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think to add to that, there's also like especially in undergrad, there's a balance between doing that and just enjoying the experience. But it's not to say that you just have to do one of them and not have the other completely. You have to sort of do both things.
You can totally have both. I
Yeah,
think like career fairs don't happen that often. Like you can have one coffee meeting a week or even one every 2 weeks. Like I'm pretty sure you have time for that. Like
yeah,
all it takes is like literally what I did was I would spend a few hours a week sending cold emails to people asking them, hey, like here's who I am. I'd love to get a meeting with you. I'll come out to you and visit you. And most of them wouldn't respond, but I would get one response out of like maybe 5 or 6 emails that I send.
mm,
And then I have a coffee meeting, right? And like I did this both my junior year and senior year, and by the end of it, I had like probably 100 coffee meetings with people, and it totally like it was such a game changer for me because it gave me so much insight into what all these different types of people do day to day.
yeah.
And rather than just like throwing the dart and be like, okay, this sounds cool, and then you end up there and you have like no idea why you're there.
Yeah, yeah, that,
And like the other pro of doing that was, um, it prepared me for interviews. Because when you're sitting there in a coffee meeting with a stranger and you have to somehow entertain them for 30 minutes and tell them why this was not a waste of their time and what questions you have to be very thoughtful with your questions. You have to like make sure not to bug them, make sure to respect their time. And so it teaches you how to like interact with people in a business setting. And I think that's also very important. And all these things are just things that people like completely leave off till like senior year comes and like, fuck, I'm graduating in a month. Like, what am I gonna do?
50 coffee meetings in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Did you have any really bad coffee meetings?
Of course. Yeah. There's a lot of people that like, they're cold or they're uninterested or, um, you just don't click with them. Like there's some people that like you can go on for hours having a meeting with them because they're just so chill, they're so laid back. And some people like they probably like, they don't want to really even accept the meeting, but they did, and then they don't want to be there and like, but that's life. You have to learn how to interact in that situation too, and like figure out how to navigate and have a decent conversation and like and um not not like what do I say? Like I guess those kinds of meetings are important too because they help build your people skills. Because this is going to happen in a business setting too. There's going to be people that you work with that you're not going to enjoy. You just have to deal with them, and you have to figure out how to deal with them, right? How to talk to them, how to get something out of them, or how to convince them of X, Y, Z. And so these meetings, even if it's a bad meeting, it's a good experience.
Yeah, and I can imagine, there's a balance between sort of having a genuine conversation with them and like, as opposed to just kissing their ass for like 30 minutes, because I'm sure like they can notice it as well.
Yeah, I hate that. Like I fucking hate that. Like there's definitely people who do that, and some people are successful doing that, but Like it's kind of the people, they're usually successful if that person that they're meeting also kisses other people's ass. So like it's a
The
mutual
cycle.
connection or something. Yeah. But like, I mean, your goal, if you're doing a coffee meeting, your main goal is really one, tell them about yourself, because the more you pitch yourself, the more better you get at pitching yourself. And a big part of getting a job is learning how to pitch yourself.
Hmm.
So pitch yourself and then see their reaction, see how they react, and then you can improve your pitch over time. And then two, just ask them questions about like, what do they do day to day? Like, what are the most challenging things? Why did they choose that career? Um, do they plan to stay there? Like, just ask questions that are like coming from your heart, like that you genuinely are curious to know. And if they're coming from your heart, then like the person is willing to answer them.
Mm.
And like just be human with them, and don't just copy paste some questions that you found on like a website and like go through them list by list and start writing the answers down or something. Like just have a real conversation like a human being, and I think the coffee meeting will go really well.
Yeah, because it is just a conversation at the end of the day. It's not, although
Yeah.
it seems like it's not an interview, it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so another sort of topic I was curious about. I know after working at Goldman Sachs for I'm not sure if it was 2 years, um, you sort of pivoted into tech and self-taught yourself how to code and go on that journey afterwards. So my like what I'm curious about is why you chose to pivot into tech and specifically teach yourself how to code instead of like enrolling in some program, because I feel like those are two things that people consider often.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I actually after banking, I went to Andreessen Horowitz for two
Okay.
years as well. So after banking, I did VC, and I genuinely loved my time there. Probably, I I have no regrets about going there. It was one of the best career experiences of my life. Um, but uh, after being one thing about A16Z is they were very entrepreneur friendly, and they were
Mm,
very they only invested in technical founders. So they didn't really believe that they didn't really invest in business founders. So if you didn't really know how to code, if you didn't know how technology worked, they weren't going to invest in you, because you can't really expect a founder to build a product if they don't even understand how the product works. So they really believed in like technical co-founders, especially for tech companies. Um, it's really hard to have just a business founder. And over the course of my 2 years there, I met hundreds of entrepreneurs, and I was like, wow, like this is actually what I want to do. Like I want to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't know what type of entrepreneur I wanted to be. I didn't know what company I wanted to build, but I realized that I would be really hindered if I didn't have the coding skills. Like I
mm,
really, really needed the coding skills if I didn't want to be dependent on other people. And I never wanted to be that person that like didn't understand how something worked, because like eh, it's limiting. It's very limiting. And so I was like, I have to teach myself. I want to learn how to code because I want this. It's just like I felt so limited in not knowing how things work, how products work, how code works, how engineering works, especially when you're in the tech world. And so I was like, okay, I need to learn how to code. I'm sure I have a long blog post about my journey, how I failed, how to learn to code, blah blah blah, which you can link.
yeah,
But the
definitely.
reason I decided to teach myself is and not go back to school, I talked about it in the blog post, is um, I I felt like uh, I felt like I could genuinely do it, because I started to see the whole learn to code movement was just starting out at the time, and I started to see a couple people who I knew who had learned to code themselves by going to Hack Reactor. So I actually did, which is a coding bootcamp, and I did a lot of research on it to figure out like if it's actually a viable path and whether people who graduated from that can actually get jobs. And I had a friend actually who went through it. Not a friend, but like college friend who went through it, and I spoke to her extensively, and she ended up, being really successful through it. She had a job as well, and I was like, okay, interesting. So there's people that are actually like graduating this coding boot camp and getting jobs. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna dump all my money into this. Like, I had saved up all my savings went into like going to this boot camp. And I was like, you know what? It's 3 months. I want to work my ass off, and I'm going to make sure I get a job no matter what happens. And I went to the boot camp, and then I spent 3 months after that learning even more on my own, and then I got a job at Coinbase.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'll definitely link your blog post in the description.
Yeah, everything's in that blog post, but
Yeah.
I kind of talked about like how it was really a struggle for me, and then and I just kept going and going and going. I was like, you know what, like it starts in the mind, right? Like I wanted it, and then I was like, I'm gonna make this happen no matter what, and then I just kind of went for it.
Yeah, and like to what you said when you're working in VC and you're meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, and like sort of like one main reason for why you wanted to code and sort of get acclimated with the tech world is because you thought to become an entrepreneur, you really need to understand the product you're building in tech. But do you feel like, for example, now, like in 2020, like do you think if someone wants to break into the tech industry in entrepreneurship or like to found a tech company, that still is a prerequisite, like just to understand the product, have a sort of a tech background?
Yes, I think it's 100% necessary. If you don't know how a product works, like because a core part of your role as a founder is you have to hire engineers, and engineers have to trust you. And for them to trust you, like you have to know their language, right? I'm gonna stop my video too. So you
Yeah,
have to know.
sorry, I just stopped it just so my laptop doesn't shut down again.
No worries.
But yeah, you can just continue.
So as a founder, you absolutely have to be able to speak the engineering language, because it's how you build your first few employees, your first founding team. If they can't trust that you know how a product works and you know what goes into the product, then how are they gonna trust that you're gonna like lead this company properly? Because especially in the early days, like the founder is everything. They're the engineer, they're the product manager, they're doing everything. So you need to have that inside knowledge. After maybe 10 to 20 employees, then you're probably not going to be coding anymore, or even doing like intricate engineering stuff. So at that point, it doesn't matter whether you're coding it or not. And it doesn't even matter whether you're coding it or not in the early days either. Like it's not about whether you're coding the actual product. It's about you being able to speak to the engineers that you're going to hire to build this product for you, and them being able to trust you, and that you understand what product you're building, you understand all the trade-offs, and you can speak their language. Either that, or you have a really, really, really smart co-founder who is technical, and you're the business person, and then you have the technical co-founder. Like that also works, I think.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, do you think you've seen a lot of examples where that sort of support what you're saying, where tech companies with non-technical co-founders have been having like turbulence or trouble because of that factor, actually?
Have I seen examples of that? I don't know names off the top of my head, but I know that it's probably because they weren't successful. But yeah, like I mean, I saw this at A16Z too. Like the companies where the founder was not technical, it was a very much like a marketing oriented company, right? Because then you're basically just a business person building a company and every like and like if you're building a tech product, like even like little things like understanding design and modern design, and like all these things are super important. Like Silicon Valley has a standard to how products are built. Like Stripe, Stripe and all these products, they're the cream of the top crop, right? Like Airbnb and um
Yeah.
Uber, like all these products have like incredible design, incredible technology, um incredible UX. And if you can't meet that standard, then like you can't you can't expect to like blow up as a company. You're going to be, just another marketing kind of plug and play product, which is it's not going to scale to billions of users, because what scales today is the type, it's like Airbnb, Uber, or something on that par. So yeah, I absolutely think like to be a founder of a tech company, you need to know how to code. And that's not to say that you can't be an entrepreneur if you don't know how to code. Of course you can do that. It's just that if you're building a tech company, I would expect that you at least know, even if you're not coding day to day, you at least know how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that your path to sort of teaching yourself how to code was successful, but the reality is not a lot of people have like one, like either the discipline or just find success in doing that. And I know that I know that you've posted on your blog post that you sort of think teachers are becoming rarer and rarer, like good teachers specifically. But like Mike, I kind of think about this as well, is how do you think people get incentives to actually become teachers, especially people like in my generation, my age? Because right now I don't think there are a lot of like, one incentives or real drives to sort of steer towards teaching for career paths belonging to people my age. So what do you think about that? I'm just curious.
Teaching as a career path.
Teaching as a career path, or even sort of like a side hobby or a side path as well.
I think like I mean I think I think being a teacher is a very you kind of you either know it or you don't, whether you're a good teacher. Like I've always been kind of very good at being able to articulate um ideas and thoughts in a clear way, and that's why I teach and I write, because I think I have clarity of thought, and I'm one of those people that I've always I've never been able to learn from other people. So how I learn is I teach myself everything. And so I have to learn everything from a very fundamental level. And so because of that, I've always been naturally good at teaching. But like if that's not you, then I don't expect you to teach. You can try to write blog posts as a way to um, enhance your own knowledge. For example, I think teaching is a great way to basically understand a topic in depth, because you can't really teach something unless you know it, right?
Mhm.
So if your goal is to just, like, let's say you are pursuing I don't know, like you're going to be a JavaScript developer or something, and if you want, you should definitely start writing stuff about JavaScript and teaching JavaScript topics just for your own sake, because it'll make you better at those topics. It'll make you more of an expert at those topics, and you'll make you understand those topics way better, because to teach it, you have to really understand it. So teaching as a way to learn is definitely a good idea, but I'm not going to promote the idea that everyone should be teachers, because I think we already have just a shit ton of terrible teachers. And like, I really think
True.
teaching I think teaching is one of those things that's like a lost art, and teachers are not trained on how to like truly teach. Anyone can kind of become a teacher nowadays, and it kind of saddens me. But yeah, that's my
Because yeah, being a
feel on it.
teacher is much different than just being an expert in your field. Because I
Oh
feel like
yeah, like
yeah, that's where the major discrepancy is, especially with, for example, people like TAs these days in universities. Sure you can. I'm sure you're very smart and you know a lot about your field, but at the end of the day, if you can't like bring your point across to like a bunch of second years or first years, then you're not a great teacher.
Yeah, TAs are awful. Like I have probably had one good TA out of like the hundreds of TAs I've had in school. And it's exactly that point. And I tweeted about this the other day where I was like, you don't learn from experts, you study them. Because usually it's rare that like an expert is also a good teacher.
Hmm.
Like knowing how to teach is an art. Like you, it is truly an art. And I think to just give that responsibility to any expert is is the downfall of like the modern education system. Even some professors, right? Like they're
Yeah.
amazing researchers and they're cream of the crop in their field, but they're terrible teachers. Like they don't actually know how to teach a subject. And to go from like A to B to C, like they kind of just like jump around from like Z to like B to D to F, and you're like, what the hell is going on? So it's yeah, I can rant about this forever, but like I think we live in a world where like teaching is it's like it's not valued as much as it should be, and as a result like anyone can become a teacher, and we have like a a like an influx of just terrible teachers. And like oftentimes this leads to people who may be gifted in a topic or subject, or may actually enjoy a topic or subject, but they have terrible teachers, so they think they don't like that subject. Like
Yeah, that's
how
also
many
another like interesting point to consider because it sort of like steers away several students from a topic that they might like, but they don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was in college, I loved something called operations research, and I was super into it because it was like you can think in like 9 dimensions, and I just love that shit. And then I wanted to do like I was so serious about it that I wanted to even like pursue it like to like get like a master's or a PhD in it. But then like the professor absolutely sucked. Like I taught myself everything from the textbook, but he was also going to be the PhD teacher. And I was like, oh my God, if he's the PhD teacher, like I don't want to work with him because he's a terrible teacher. And so it completely gravitated me away from that topic. Or even in school, right? Like kids, like calc can actually be super fun. Like if it's taught right, and probability and all these subjects can actually be super, super interesting if they're taught properly, but they're not. And so most kids end up leaving school hating these subjects.
Especially as you said, like math, statistics, especially
All these are
relevant.
super interesting topics. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the one of the reasons I loved physics is because I had such an amazing teacher, and like she was just so good at teaching physics, and I just it clicked for me. I was like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing subject in the world. Um, but like I remember I visited the other physics teacher's class. We had two physics teachers in my high school, and I couldn't even understand what he was saying. I was like, God, like I thank God I didn't have him because I would have not liked physics. So it's sad,
Yeah,
but that's sad
definitely.
reality.
I can definitely relate to that because even in high school, I had like, the best chemistry teacher, and chemistry was, as a result, one of my favorite subject. And a lot of people don't like chemistry because they usually have bad
I
teachers.
hate chemistry, and it's because I had a terrible teacher.
Yeah,
And then later on, I was like, oh my God, chemistry is actually pretty cool. Like if it's taught
yeah, it
properly,
is.
right?
Exactly. And sort of, I wanted to ask you about blockchain and your most recent company, True Story as well. Sort of like a
Yep.
two different topics, but I want to find out first of all, what gravitated you towards blockchain. I know uh, your first role in a major tech company was at Coinbase, so I'm sure that had a big role to play. But sort of, did you have an interest in blockchain before that even?
Yeah. So I learned about blockchain when I was at A16Z. I worked with Balaji Srinivasan, and he was very influential in the whole crypto space in the early days because he convinced a lot of us that we should look into this and it's going to change the world. So I looked into it, but I didn't really fully understand it or understand the hype around it at the time. And then when I was deciding what company I wanted to join, and at the time when I joined Coinbase, I was, early in my career. And when you're early in your career, the bet you're making is the market bet, right? Like, do you want to go into crypto? Do you want to go into machine learning? Do you want to go into bio? Like, you're betting on the field. So I had a bunch of options. I had option to join like machine learning companies. I had options to join crypto companies, AI companies, and I wanted to make a bet on crypto because I felt like it was early and it was still complete chaos, and there was an opportunity to make a big impact in that space. And and then secondly, the more I read about crypto, the more I'm like, oh my god, this makes so much sense, because it was like a mix of, I mean, and everyone will tell you this, is like crypto is kind of this like mix of probability, math, economics, finance, just a whole thing. Everything comes together into like one topic. And so if you're kind of a generalist like I am, it's a very interesting space to operate in. And there's a lot of different ways that you can use crypto as a tool to fix different things. And so I fell in love with it. And then I joined Coinbase, and then obviously that made me go deeper in this space. But it wasn't actually at Coinbase that I truly got into crypto. It was after I left Coinbase, I started to really, really fall in love with the Ethereum ecosystem and Ethereum community. And I wrote like the blog post about how Ethereum works. And then I got really sucked into it because it finally clicked for me. I was like, oh my God, like this makes so much sense. Now I understand like how smart contracts work and how smart contracts can be used to build trustless applications. And like, what is the purpose of crypto? Like, how can it be used as a tool to enhance our lives? Like, everything started to click for me after I kind of figured out what Ethereum was and what smart contracts were and so forth. And so that was kind of my foray into crypto. And I kind of went head deep into it. And then I found a true story, obviously, where we used crypto as a tool to moderate debates. So people would get incentivized to if they produced good arguments for a debate, and then they'd get disincentivized if they produce like trolly arguments for a debate.
Yeah, and yeah, that's awesome. And there's a lot of, especially around 2015, 2016, 2017, there was a lot of hype around crypto, especially uh, several of the coins blew up in their price. And after that, like what ensued is that, from what I understand, there was a lot of misconceptions as well, a lot of hype. But my question is, in spite of that, do you think the blockchain community and the ecosystem is good at bringing people who don't know anything about crypto and actually making them well versed in crypto, the sort of the fundamentals in it, because it can seem confusing, a bit confusing at first to learn about it.
So your question is whether it's easy for new people to come into crypto?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely gotten easier over time, but at the time, absolutely not. In 2016, 2017, it was just a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Like, it was hype. It was so hyped. There was so much misinformation. I don't think anyone truly knew what this all meant. It was a feeling. Crypto was like a feeling in 2016, 2017. It was like, this is going to be massive. We don't exactly know how or why or exactly what the solution looks like, but we know that it gives us this like really, really cool way of thinking about how to coordinate a group of people to produce a certain outcome. And that's just really cool, and like internet money and blah, blah, blah. So it was really hard to kind of figure it out. And that was one of the things I wanted to do in the early days, was write blog posts to explain crypto, because I felt like it was so hard to get into it. And that's why I wrote that How Does Ethereum Work Anyway article. Nowadays, I think there's definitely a lot more educational content out there, like people like Jameson Lopp, and a lot of people have written so much content that if you really wanted to get into crypto, there's so much you can read and learn about it.
And do you feel like do you see a lot of new people trying to get into crypto in the coming years?
Absolutely. It comes in waves. Right now, crypto is not exactly the hype
Yeah.
in a hype phase, and so people that are already there are staying there, but you don't really see as many new people coming into crypto. But give it another like 1 to 3 years, and you'll see a hype train happen again. And then you'll see more people enter, and it's just like any industry, right? Like
Yeah.
even in every industry, there's always like cycles, up and downs, up and down. So 2017 was a massive influx of people, and it was good for the ecosystem. And then a lot of people dropped out after the fake people dropped out basically, and now you have like the real authentic people who are still around, and then you'll have another influx of people, and then it's like that. There's like a cycle, right? Like a Gardner hype cycle or whatever, and it goes through all these cycles. So we're kind of going through that right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure that True Story was you were able to learn a lot from True Story, and I know you guys had a pretty good following, because I was actually one of the people using the beta of the product, and I'm wondering what you noticed didn't work with True Story.
So I wrote a blog post about this too, but basically what it sums up is we felt that we were too early to market. We felt like something like this will exist, and someone will use crypto to incentivize productive conversations, because it just makes so much sense. But for us to be successful, we needed a bunch of building blocks to be built. Like we needed way faster like blockchains, we needed better wallet signing, like all these things that like are periphery to the actual product, and they're not like related to our core product, but they're necessary if you want to build a crypto app. And even just launching a token, right? Like launching a token in the US is a nightmare. You have to go abroad and like kind of do it like in a shady way, and like it's just there's just so many like risks that like it's not even about the product risk anymore. It's about all these other regulatory and compliance risks that we felt like the chances of us being successful in this market right now is really low. And I think it's going to take another 2 to 5 years for all these building blocks to be built before we can be successful. And so we figured like, why not just be honest with ourselves and then wait for these building blocks to be built, rather than trying to just keep going and be kind of like the web WAN of, you know, uh, what's it called? The web WAN of, what's that grocery delivery company that in the US?
Which one?
In the
Instacart?
US. Yeah, like, it's like kind of like the web WAN of the Instacart. Like, I think all the companies that are out there in crypto right now, maybe one of them will end up being successful in 10 to 20 years. Kind of like, in the early days of the internet, there was thousands of companies, but the only one that still exists today is Amazon.
Yeah.
So I think in 20 years from now, the only company, there'll maybe be one company that exists from the current generation, but a lot of the real companies will be built 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it speaks to how competitive it is to sort of make a footprint in whatever like developing space is sort of the talk right now, whether it's blockchain or machine learning, and especially during times like these, it's been really hard for startups to develop and sustain themselves, like during the pandemic especially. Yeah. And so that being said, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can learn a lot from this, from your insights and everything that you spoke about.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. See you. Art of Impact is co-hosted by myself, Talal Fahoun, and Anga Darneja. Behind production and occasional co-host is Tate Claggett. Our director of marketing is Max Bayevsky, and our music is produced by Pranav Vaidyanathan. Thank you for listening, and see you soon.